The Pleasant View Heritage Foundation, our goal is to try and share some history, one, that we don't forget it, but two, that we'll appreciate a little bit more where we came from and why we're here. Whether I grew up in North Ogden, and so I kind of inherited the city, but many of you might have DNA that goes back a ways, maybe even to some of the Native Americans we're going to talk about tonight. But we hope that that helps you feel the value of the city. Holly and Curtis Fuller, they work over at the North Ogden Museum. This is probably the earliest known map of, and I don't know that we can understand it completely, but you see this is possibly the tops of the Rocky or the Wasatch Mountains. Sun may be up above. Spring here, hot springs perhaps down here, but actually is suggesting a path that comes right along the base through Willard down towards the hot springs. And then we would think that path probably split here. Some went on out to the valley, and then the main path going up over the mountains that way. So that's pretty old. Yeah.
During that Aspenbrook on the upper left.
Uh-huh.
It's right above it, so it's kind of like maybe where the map of Fremont Village used to be.
Okay, great. So Fremont Village is on that map also. So that's a pretty amazing petroglyph. So this is just more of a modern, I guess, representation. It shows all of or at least many of the Native American map trails, routes. But the part that I think is interesting, of course, here's the Great Salt Lake right here, as you have this main coming up, the Great Salt Lake. And this would be, of course, where the Willard Bay is today, but shows it going right across or up we call it the North Ogden Divide, over the mountains there. And then, as Joe pointed out, either up to Bear Lake or up to Cache Valley, which were where the Native Americans loved to spend, of course, the summers up there, like many of you guys do, right? So that was a main threshold from coming out of the plains down here in the dry land to the mountains up here where they would hunt and so forth. So that's where we live. So view, this is 1927, which is probably, I don't know if it looked much different 100 years before that, but this is the bench we live on. That would be Hunts Rock and Frogmouth down here. Anybody remember Frogmouth? Did you climb Frogmouth, Curtis? Oh, yeah. You bet. Okay, so those you did too. It was still there, and now it's covered with houses. Anyway, so that shows the benches that was pointed out as Lake Bonneville, of course, was receding. In the early days, though, it wasn't like the Harrisville was where it's at. This is actually Rice Creek that is the water source for North Ogden water, and some other tributaries that forms a fairly good-sized stream and kind of is the lower part of the valley where what Harrisville would be today. And so this ground becomes fairly marshy. Not where the Indians want to be. It's not where pioneers want to be too often. And so that bench country, and this is just another about 3 or 4 years later, shows those benches. I don't know if this is their real name, but I think it's just interesting. When I was growing up, there was a Blaylock family that lived right up here, about as high as the houses were in that day. So that's the upper Blaylock bench, I call it. That's the highest one on the hill. And then the one just below that is the one that Frogmouth is on. But you can see that plain. And these would be pathways or routes, as he was calling them, that Native Americans could have been traveling. Their main route was from the hot springs out of the valley up to North Ogden Divide. So when they were in that country, they'd travel any place they wanted to. When it got to a narrower point, obviously, then the trails constrict and become one. The lowest one, I guess, where are we at? Back up there.
Jerry,
yes, sir.
that upper bench, that's called the escarpment.
Thank you. They use those big fancy names. Escarpment means steep and high, and you don't want to get on it, right?
Top part of the lake.
Right, top part of it.
Where the erosion occurred.
Right. But that's, if you've ever hiked up there, it's a little bit difficult to get to. I think the easiest path would have been right in front of the city building that he was talking about. And as these folks and many have found lots of archival artifacts, stone, anyway, that seem to verify that there was a lot of Native American traffic. So, well, let me just back up a little bit. So this map also, when the fur trappers came in, first the Hudson Bay Company would have been further up here, but the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, they were further south. And during the, 1826, 25, right in through there, they had their major rendezvous right in the Ogden Weber River confluence. So that was kind of their main headquarters. And the way they would come in and out of there was up over North Ogden and then up into their trapping areas. They actually sent a boat down the Weber River trying to see if they could trap out on the Great Salt Lake. Any beaver out there? They came right back, didn't want to go any further, and continued their trapping. But anyway, and so the trappers came in and added to those routes or trails that the Native Americans had already initiated. So when the Rocky Mountain Fur Company left, this good gentleman, Miles Goodyear, 1847, he didn't want to leave. He could have had a couple of wives. That was before the Mormons came. But anyway, but he talks about, and he wrote this, by the way, this is his own hand. He says, our breath, the mountain air so clear, or chase the buffalo or the plain. Anyway, here I am and here I'll remain. That's Miles Goodyear. That's what he thought about it. The only problem Miles had is, of course, he would go up the Weber River, up the Ogden River, still like to trap and do what he could. But he was up there September of 1847, and he ran into a guy named Porter Rockwell. Don't know if you know Porter, but he was a scout for Brigham Young's Pioneer Company, and he was just coming down the Blacks Fork as the Pioneer Company was coming west. And so anyway, I think they startled each other and began to talk a little bit. Mormons were coming. He explained, there's an awful lot of people coming. Miles, what you going to do? Well, Miles realized he wasn't quite sure he wanted that kind of population, but he didn't have much choice. So the year after that, Miles Goodyear, and I'm not sure where he got his bill of sale for the land, but he works out a deal with Captain John Brown, representing the Mormon pioneer people, for $1,950. He sells all of Weber County to the Mormons. Made a profit on it, I think. They sold it to him, you bet. He was a good trader. Well, he describes it actually. He has a great description of it going from the Weber River up along the base of the mountains to Ben Lomond Divide, or to Ben Lomond, off to the hot springs, out to Great Salt Lake, going south along the border of the beach of Great Salt Lake, back to the confluence with the Weber River. Sounds like Weber County. So anyway, that was Miles Goodyear. And again, the roads, the trails that he was traveling on were the same ones that the fur traders left before him and the Native Americans had left before him. Travis says he knows these folks. I haven't met him yet, but they're just an example. Just an example of, those pioneers that came, that was pretty rugged. They'd already traveled a long ways, kids and so forth. Weren't the best wagons. It wasn't the big prairie schooners that you see. But so just kind of an overview. We'll come back to this. But the first road that is described left Ogden River right here, and it did not go down in the valley. It's called the Pioneer Road, and kind of followed what would be the mountain road today. Comes right along the base of the Wasatch Front there. Actually, there's a divide right here where it separated, and one went over the North Ogden Divide up into Ogden Valley. And the other one follows the base of Ben Lomond, Milton R. Hunter described, going across Pleasant View towards the hot springs. So that would have been the first pioneer road, if you will. Later, we're going to talk about another road when the stagecoach comes, this orange line right here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I kind of think that Pleasant View is kind of like an old house, that has a front door and a back door. And people were just always coming in the front door and going out the back door, or going in the back door and going through the front door, and never stayed too long. They just kind of, Indian camps we'll talk about. But you will notice that there's always kind of an entering and those two ends of the city have remained kind of entry points, I guess, to Pleasant View yet today. When Mormon pioneers came in 1850, Brigham Young actually commissioned a survey of the farmlands from Provo to Ogden. And so a guy named William Lemon was the one who took care of that survey, 1850 to 1855. This is a copy of the survey, but you see the main road that come out from Brown's Hole down here, Ogden, Territorial Road it was called. That would be Washington Boulevard today. And then, of course, he's got the road or the properties. What's interesting on this road, or on this map, is here's the Pioneer Road. Leaves, they called it Farr's Fort, that was up on about 12th and Harrison, where the Ogden River is, and follows kind of the base of the mountains. separates right here. That one goes up over the North Ogden Divide. And then this one kind of goes across North Ogden. And we'll see this pick up, and we call it Pioneer Road, which was described in Pleasant View. 1858, which is a long time ago in our history. Mike, how long have you been taking care of that ditch? Yeah, he's the guy that digs all of the dead muskrats out of that ditch and keeps it flowing. Anyway, that's the same canal that goes through Pleasant View that's been there for an awful long time. And I suspect when they put that canal in, there's another Pioneer Road that kind of goes along there when that was built. So looking at a similar map just a little bit further, this is maybe closer to the 1853 when they begin to build North Ogden Fort and Fars Fort and some of those Indian uprisings. People, Brigham Young encouraged them to gather and build forts. So this would have been North Ogden Fort. You can see the Pioneer Road coming up here. They show it going across through the fort area. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's the canal down here. Of course, in those days too, it's interesting. Here's Rice Creek coming down, going right through the middle of North Ogden. Coldwater. Those are both, of course, major sources of the water supply for North Ogden today. But a lot more water running around than we're used to seeing. Doing a close-up, this is again the North Ogden Fort. Were you there, Holly? In the North Ogden Fort. You weren't that old. But you've got a piece of the old wall, don't you, in front of your museum? Yep, so there was a fort there. The thing I think is interesting is this road, and you see this road here says Fars Fort Road. And of course, so that one's going back to Ogden, Fars Fort. And it seems like it cuts right across the corner. It's not a rectangle or a square, but that Pioneer Road goes right up across there. And so there shows the road going up towards Pleasant View. This is Earl Cragen's map when he did his master's thesis in 1954. I think that he, and probably with some help, put together the history that he had. We'll give a close-up of this in just a minute. But you can see coming into Alberta Drive here, but that old Pioneer Road, it's not marked very well, but you see where the dots are. Those were people that had built their houses along that Pioneer Road. So this shows that better. Here's Alberta Drive today, and there's where the Pioneer Road came in from North Ogden, works its way all the way across. You see the Indian villages that Joe was referring to, and camps. Thank you. Camps. When I take my family out, it's not a village, it's a camp, right? Okay, but anyway, you can see they're interspersed, and there's lots of stories about the interactions there. We'll come back to this map in just a few minutes. This is the old woolen mill, Ogden Woolen Mill, that actually was built in 1867. So this is maybe 10 years or so after that other road, have had to build bridges across the streams, and those are all paid for. In fact, the first bridge was built by a guy named Captain John Brown, James Brown from North Ogden. He got $300 and 3 cows to put a bridge across the Ogden River and the Weber River, and then he could charge a toll. They didn't last very long, weren't very good bridges, so a year and a half later they paid some more money to get better bridges. But anyway, they had to have those bridges before people could, of course, come into the area. So here's the woolen mill, and that was kind of the southern beginning of this Pioneer Road. Joe, have you ever walked on that road? I don't think that is the actual Pioneer Road, but I'm just guessing there are a few roads that go through the sagebrush, on the hills of North Ogden that don't look, and Pleasant View, a lot different than that Pioneer Road did. It was not a fancy road at all. It kind of moved up and through the valley or through the ravines and so forth. The way these roads were maintained, they had a poll tax that the territorial government enforced. Every family had to work 1 day a year, 10 hours. And if you had any kids that were old enough, male or female, they had to come out and help work. So you owed 1 day a year to maintaining the roads. And so I don't know if it got very well maintained or not, right? But anyway, that was the way they built and maintained roads. And there was a road supervisor that was selected as volunteer position in each of the areas. So on Sunday, the supervisor would probably go to the local congregation and say, this coming Wednesday, we're going to have a project on the road. All you that can show up, let's do it. Bring your horses. Kind of like a beach farm assignment. Anyway. As that Pioneer Road went further north, this is just my idea of perhaps what as it separated, and one of the ones went up North Ogden Canyon. Of course, this is going to go over towards Pleasant View, if we're following that idea. Some more good-looking pioneers, right? Getting a little sturdier as they come along. Their wagons are getting heavier because they're hauling more furniture and stuff than the earlier guys did. But those roads are going to get a little bit more built in, I guess. This is a picture, so it says, of Ogden Canyon, the mouth of Ogden Canyon in 1860. Milton R. Hunter, who wrote an early history, said it was impassable except a small stream that went through there. And so thus North Ogden Divide until 1860 was the main entrance, as Joe pointed out, to Ogden Valley, Huntsville, and that whole area up there. And then in 1860, they actually began to build the trolley line up there, and so they do a lot of blasting and so forth. They'll open that up to transportation. But that was the old Ogden Canyon. So about 1860, a guy named Holiday from California built the Overland Stage Company and started a stage line running through the West, okay? Have public transportations beginning. And rather than following that old pioneer road, that weaved and bobbed all over along the side of the mountain, in what was it, about 1858, the Mormon pioneers, the people who had gone to the Mormon Battalion, were working their way back to Salt Lake, and they came up the California Trail that goes right through City of the Rocks, if you know where that is, over in southern Idaho, and up to Fort Hall. Well, a guy named Henley found a shortcut. He just rode it on a horse, but it went through there over towards Malad and then down. That's later called the Salt Lake or Hot Springs Cutoff. And so this stage line that now is being built probably 15 years after that is going to follow that Salt Lake cutoff. Here's Pleasant View right here, just north of Ogden, and it's going to follow that stage line, except they're going to go straight up the bottom of the valley there. So here's where the stage line is. That stage line, as Holiday began to build it, had stations every 15 miles. And so there's the station that was at the mouth of Weber Canyon, somewhere along 1860, 1861, when they were first building those. You can see a place for the horses. The thing that's important to Pleasant View is that we also had a station, Stagecoach Station. Anybody know where that marker is? Can you identify that? Mayor, where is it? City Park, right in the middle of City Park. Daughters of the Utah Pioneers have put in a marker there, and I won't take time to read this, but it talks about the Maurer family, John and Sarah Maurer, and they were the ones who actually maintained the station from about 1860 and probably until just the Golden Spike, when the railroad came in. Well, not as fast. Anyway, so they maintained the Stagecoach station there. So now we've got two entrances to Pleasant View, right? The Pioneer Road coming in from North Ogden, and then the Stagecoach line coming directly out. There's the Maurer family, just two of them right now. They didn't have a lot of kids early. So we're going back then to the road. So we have the Pioneer Road, but it was along this road that obviously the early families are going to be building their homes. So here's Amos Maycock in 1875. That home is still there. If you know Jeremy, he and his family live there. Further up the road, you ever heard of the Cragen family? Go ahead.
Did you see my email that you asked me a question about that?
Do you have an answer?
It's 1874.
74. I thought that was a little bit late.
This is a problem that we've had for a long time.
Uh-huh.
Someone put the date that the photograph was taken.
Oh, okay.
That's his entire family minus one child. And he died, Wilford would have died 3 years after this was taken.
So who's this guy right here with the, looks like an,
That's Wilford.
that's Wilford. He was the guy who built the house.
Yeah.
Okay, and then his family, and this you up here?
No. And he has a grandson in the picture right behind him. Yeah, right there.
Right here, this little one.
They moved into that house when his oldest two living children were
Okay.
little children.
So just back that up about 20 years then. Yeah, so anyway, that's where people begin building their homes, was along that road. So moving along quickly here if we can. This is Cragen Lane that went directly south, probably somewhere around 1920. As you can see, is it paved? What happens when it gets wet? Pretty muddy, pretty muddy. So Earl Cragen, in his book, he was just a young lad, and he talks about bringing the cows down that lane, and they went out to Jack Stewart Lane, which is 2550 in Harrisville today. But they'd bring the cows down that lane. He also said it was loaded with wild dogs. Dogs. You have a dog? Not wild, but these dogs were so bad they'd come out and nip at the horse's feet. And so the teenagers, as the automobiles began to come in fashion about that same time, would put burlap around the wheels of the car. So when the dogs would bite the burlap, what happens to the dog's neck? Anyway, they didn't bite it again. But anyway, so he also talks about, he'd probably been about 15 or so, Earl Cragen. Did anybody know Earl? Who remembers Earl? Some of you do. Okay. So Earl talks about when he was a young teenager, he said, I was riding my horse down behind the cows, and they had to go across that canal. Time's up. Had to go across that canal, and the cows didn't want to go across the bridge. It was a wickety wooden bridge, so they went through the canal where they could cool off, and so the horse wants to go through the canal also, right? So the horse goes through the canal, and of course the horse wants to cool off, so he rolls over in the canal. Earl's still on top of, at least he was on top of the horse, falls off of the horse, and that canal is pretty full, so he says. So it is pushing him down against the bridge now, and he's going to get pushed under the bridge. He's beginning to worry a little bit about his life. Apparently there were some willows that somebody didn't clean out of the canal. But anyway, he grabs onto one of those willows, pulls himself out, is able to get the horse out, and he says, I led the horse back home, and I don't know what happened to the cows. I think they found him okay. But anyway, that was Cragen Lane, but it's just I think that's kind of indicative of the other tributaries. We'll look at let's back up here. Other tributaries that went up to the Pole Patch, or other offshoots of Pleasant View Drive and Alberta Drive. So before the roads were paved, to get rid of the mud, they tried to put gravel on them. This is actually a gravel road that's out near the hot springs now. Some of them was round, but the gravel, actually the best gravel pits were the Chamberlain property. There's still a good quarry there, up by Hunts Rock, Tent Rock. They would go up on the high side of the hill there and gravel these roads, so it would fill up the mud and the bogs and so forth. That territorial road that we were talking about back in North Ogden that's become Washington, that was not used at all because it was so boggy down there. The horses would sink in up to their chests and they'd have to pull them out. They finally got enough rock on it in 1894 that it was more passable. So it took quite a long time to do that. Mayor, who does the best snow plowing in Weber County?
We do by far.
Pleasant View does like their snow plowing. So anyway, this is the way they did it back in those days. They, of course, would build this, had kind of a boom in front of it, like the front of a boat, 18 feet across. And of course, this was a volunteer process. They'd come out and they'd bring their own teams of horses to pull the snow plow. How many teams did it take to pull that thing? Okay, there's at least 3 big teams there, okay? 3 in a team probably. And I don't know if those are buffalo skin coats or something else. But anyway, that's a fun way to plow the snow. Maybe. Pleasant View Drive, as we know it today, was first paved in about 1912. That territorial road was paved just a year before that in 1911. George Edward Humphreys. Lynn, who is our president, is not here tonight. He's with his family. But he told me that his grandpa So you'll have to verify that your grandpa also actually edged the 6 miles of concrete from the stump to Hot Springs with a hand trowel, and then came back the other way. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a piece of that cement road that is down by the Peter Skeen Ogden Memorial. You've probably seen that down there. But anyway, that was when Pleasant View Drive was first paved. About 20 years after that, Highway 89 was established, again following the Salt Lake cutoff, where the stage had gone. Stages no more existed a long time ago, but that's what remains of Highway 89, and it was, of course, a double-wide cement highway. Those are the guys that used the road. Fresh potatoes right there, right? Maybe they came out of your neighbor's garden, I'm not sure. But anyway, of course, the produce, I've been waiting to ask you this question, Holly. Can you tell me the name of these good ladies right here? I know you would know them if I gave you more time. Okay. Anyway, they're two good sisters from North Ogden, and this was all North Ogden, that were out gathering eggs for the Relief Society. So they got on old Fran, which was the name of the horse, and went out and gathered eggs. On those roads, they were probably gravel at that time. And then, of course, the mail was delivered. Actually, you have an ancestor that was delivering mail. Albert, right? It's not Albert. What's his first name? I forgot.
Well, Frederick.
Frederick.
Frederick was the first one here.
Yeah, Frederick was the first mailman in Pleasant View. There was, of course, the store where they got mail. This is the guy who was in North Ogden delivering mail at that time also. But, of course, wagons turned into cars, and thus the wagons changed. So making a transition here, Travis is going to tell us a little bit about the next development of transportation. And I'm just going to do a quick overview for him. That's when, in 1869, of course, we have the Transcontinental Railroad. And when the Transcontinental Railroad came in, that's the purple line here, of course, it went through Ogden, had a station at Hot Springs. And that station is going to stay there for the next 50 years. So there's train traffic or access. Of course, that's going to go on out to Promontory Ridge, where the meeting of the rails are. Because of how the rail traffic there, of course, we're going to have Ogden City is going to start a trolley organization here. It's not going to be too successful, but a guy named Swain, who owned the Hot Springs, is going to buy that, and it'll go through a number of different owners and develop the trolley line that's going to go up that way. Final slide, well, second to last. So that just shows the railroad. The Union Pacific actually went 17 miles past Ogden out to Promontory Point. But the people in the east said, no, we don't want the meeting of the rails to be out there. We want Junction City to be where there's some people. So Ogden became Junction City. And so therefore the Central Pacific, who was coming from California, had to buy back from the Union Pacific 17 miles of rail, so that the Junction City of the two railroads would actually be in Ogden. Because of all of the railroads that had built, I'll show them to you, but in 1870, 10 trains a day would go through Hot Springs Station. Probably busier than it is today. And that just shows in Earl's map, you can see those actual railroad tracks. Most of them have been pulled up now, but the Union Pacific and Central Pacific is that one. Smaller gauge railroad was the Utah Central. That was the one that was the LDS Church Railroad. Southern Pacific's going to be put in, but all of those railroads were running right parallel to where Pleasant View is today.